This boy has such unique powers in his body that he can reconnect the severed parts of his body. This guy named Dongsoo. So, one day, as he was heading to catch a bus, he was singing a song he made up. But then, out of nowhere, some shady folks show up and snatch him away. Turns out, these guys are into some seriously bad stuff. They kidnap people and sell their organs. Poor Dongsoo gets dragged to this doctor who starts taking out all his organs, like some kind of horror movie. Dongsoo's almost out for the count, but get this, he's still awake. He's watching this doc do his thing, even when his eyes are being plucked out. Creepy, right? But then, something totally weird happens. Tentacles start popping out of Dongsoo's body, and he starts fixing himself up. The doc freaks out, puts Dongsoo's eyes back in. Dongsoo manages to break free before they can finish the job. Now, a few days later, there's this crazy incident. Someone's placed a statue of a beautiful lady smack dab in the middle of the road. Everyone's going nuts over it, snapping pictures and all. But then, bam! Turns out, it's not a statue at all, it's a real person turned into stone. Word spreads fast, and even the cops get involved. They find these weird symbols, P and N, on the poor victim. Meanwhile, Dongsoo's just trying to get by, nursing his wounds and feeling pretty down. Then, one night, his eye starts acting up, and he sees those same symbols from the statue. Turns out, some dude's got his eye. That explains why Dongsoo's been seeing all this crazy stuff. So, he heads off to his job at the junkyard, but things take a turn when some thugs start beating up his friend. Dongsoo jumps in to help, and things get messy. He ends up getting his ear sliced off, but get this, he just sticks it back on like it's no big deal. See, these guys are after him because his body's like super special, it heals up no matter what. And apparently, that's worth a ton of cash on the black market. After the scuffle, Dongsoo heads home to practice his song. But he's still struggling with the lyrics, so he listens to it again and starts practicing. That's when he starts seeing visions of the guy with his eye. His eye starts acting up again, so he decides to go back to where it all started and find his missing eye. But the bad guys are onto him, and they try to grab him again. Dongsoo's running for his life when this girl named Lee shows up and saves him. She knows who he is and even cuts him with her knife to test his healing powers. Once she sees he's the real deal, Dongsoo makes a run for it, leaving Lee behind. So, there's this book that Dongsoo sees in his mind. It's like a guide on how to turn people into statues. Turns out, the guy with Dongsoo's eye is the one behind all this. He's turning folks into stone statues and scattering them around the city. Then there's this girl, she's on her way to work, jamming out to Dongsoo's song. It's blowing up everywhere. She spots another statue in the city, but this one's not a statue at all, it's a real person who's been turned into stone. She tells her friend Mr. Jean about it, even though he's got some shady habits, she's into him. She sings Dongsoo's song to Mr. Jean, and both their eyes start hurting. Turns out, Mr. Jean is the guy with Dongsoo's eye, and he's the one turning people into statues. Dongsoo figures out that his eyes are somehow connected to the killer. Whenever his song plays, his eyes try to connect to Mr. Jin's. He starts seeing stuff in his visions, like the words corpse art. He looks it up online and finds out Mr. Jin's behind it all. Before proceeding further in the story, see the analytics of our channel. 99% of you watch our videos, like them but do not subscribe. We need your love, show your love by subscribing to the channel. So, Dongsoo goes to see a fortune teller, tells him about the symbols he's been seeing and the dates of the murders. The fortune teller says it's all connected, and there's gonna be another murder tomorrow, but they don't know where or when. Meanwhile, the girl who's into Mr. Jean moves and finds the book that explains how the killings are done. She realizes Mr. Jin's the killer. The next day, there's another statue in the city. Gang sees him. They try to grab him, but Lee shows up and saves him again. Lee tells Dongsoo she's writing a novel called Connect about superhumans like him whose body parts can heal themselves. She helps Dongsoo and he leaves, getting her number. On the other hand, Mr. Jin's friend figures out the truth and confronts him on the roof. She knows everything about the statues and the people he's killed. But just as she's about to spill the beans, Mr. Jin's phone rings, giving him away. He beats her up and pushes Dongsoo's friend off the roof, leaving her unconscious. So, Dongsoo's song starts playing on this girl's phone, and it makes Dongsoo and Mr. Jin's eyes hurt. Dongsoo gets this vision where he sees Mr. Jin brutally ending two people. He rushes to Mr. Jin's office, where everyone's freaking out about the murders. Dongsoo spots Mr. Jin's coat and decides to follow him into the bathroom. But he doesn't see his face, and the police end up arresting Dongsoo because they think he's the killer. Dongsoo tries to explain that the real killer is in the bathroom, but no one believes him. Luckily, Lee shows up and saves him again. Meanwhile, Mr. Jin's stressing out at the office because he realizes his eye is causing all the trouble. Whoever has the other eye can see everything Mr. Jin does. One day, Dongsoo opens up to Lee and tells her everything, even going back to when he was a kid. He tells her about his weird healing powers and how people called him a monster. His family even abandoned him. Then he tells her about the night he got kidnapped and had his eye taken out, which Mr. Jin now has. He wants Mr. Jin arrested, but he doesn't know much about him. Lee's shocked by all this but promises to support Dongsoo. She gives him glasses to help hide his identity. But when they go out, they see wanted posters with Dongsoo's face on them, and the police are after him. Plus, his eye starts hurting, and he sees Mr. Jin threatening him. Dongsoo realizes Mr. Jin is the one with his eye and also knows about the next murder. So, he goes out looking for Mr. Jin but ends up getting caught by the police. They beat him up in jail, but Dongsoo insists he's not the killer. He spills everything to the inspector about Mr. Jin having his eye. So, Dongsoo shows the inspector how he can break his hand and it just fixes itself. The inspector's amazed by this. Dongsoo jumps off the roof to catch Mr. Jin because he knows he won't get hurt. Meanwhile, Mr. Jin goes to the surgeon who gave him Dongsoo's eye. Flashback to when Mr. Jin asked for the eye, and the doctor agrees to try it out. But when the doctor figures out what Mr. Jin did, Mr. Jin ends him. The gang finds the dead doctor and realizes Mr. Jin's behind it all. Lee and Dongsoo are looking for the doctor too. Lee spots a guy following Dongsoo and takes care of him. Dongsoo's happy because his song is gonna be launched by his favorite singer. But Mr. Jin calls Dongsoo and they talk for the first time. Dongsoo asks why Mr. Jin's hurting people, and he says he's sick and wants revenge. The police find the guy Lee took care of and get evidence against Mr. Jin. Lee shows Dongsoo that she can heal too, and wonders if there are others like them. Meanwhile, Mr. Jin kidnaps Dongsoo's favorite singer and threatens to hurt him if Dongsoo doesn't show up. The gang captures Dongsoo, but Lee handles them. When they see Lee healing, they decide to sell her organs too. Lee escapes, and the police gather more evidence against Mr. Jin. Dongsoo and Mr. Jin face off, but Mr. Jin sets off gas that knocks Dongsoo out. Mr. Jin takes Dongsoo and the singer to another place. Lee goes to this monster and wakes it up. It's like Dongsoo and Lee, and they go with her. Mr. Jin takes Dongsoo and the singer to his hideout. The doctor's hanging lifeless, and his killer wants to turn him into a statue. Seeing this, Dongsoo feels sorry for the singer. Mr. Jin, the killer, tells them he's dying from cancer and plans to use Dongsoo's body and brain to keep living. He cuts off Dongsoo's finger to prove it, then locks them in a freezer. The singer dies, and Dongsoo's furious. He breaks free, Lee arrives with the monster, and Mr. Jin realizes Lee's also connected. He attacks her, but Dongsoo steps in and beats him up more. Mr. Jin keeps shooting Dongsoo, but he keeps healing. Dongsoo takes back his eye from Mr. Jin and is about to end him when the police show up. They stop Dongsoo and promise to clear his name. They tell him to start fresh. Lee and Dongsoo think things are finally okay, but then they see military helicopters. The military found out about Connect and captures them. What's next for them? We'll have to wait for Season 2 to find out. And that's the end of Season 1. Thank you for supporting us.